5 of this Writing on the Edge seminar series with me, Dawn Bates. As you all know, I'm really great at this technology malarkey. That's why I write books, not a programmer or a so I'm just going to share the files with you all. And I'm hoping that's going to work. Yes, it did. I'm already ahead of myself. Look, I'm on step 7. I'll be honest with you, everybody. I've only just finished these slides. By the seat of my pants, I managed to get them finished. It's been one of those weeks, but welcome to week 5. Wherever you're at in week 5, or whether this is your first week, I am your host, Dawn Bates. I call myself a writer rather than an author because I need to write. Without writing, I lose my sanity, quite literally. Yes, I'm published, so that makes me an author. So again, making that distinction for those of you who've asked me what's the difference between a writer and an author. An author is someone who's had their writing published. Doesn't necessarily have to be a book. It could be essays, it could be white papers, theses, etc. And I coach the whole person, not just the writing, although I do teach writing. I don't just coach on how to get your book published, but I actually, being an author coach is about the whole person and the business that goes into writing books or to writing for a living. And the boutique publisher aspect of that is where I will work with you on a particular subject or a genre, or we do the hybrid publishing, which is where you pay us for our services, we publish it for you, you've got skin in the game. We do not buy your manuscripts from you and then hold you to ransom. We also do not take royalties. So just to clarify those bits and pieces for you there. Now, this week we are looking at language, tone, framing, and how to craft your narrative. We're going to be looking at the language that heals, not harms, how to frame your truth in a way that lands with impact. And we're going to be looking at, I can't see what that third bit says because the wonderful land of Zoom has the bar across the bottom. See if I can get rid of that. There we go. And how language and tone can influence trust and resonance. Now, there have been some people who've seen this post because I do tend to drop a lot of truth bombs, as they call it, or mic drops, or any of the other buzzwords that people like to use. I have a no BS filter, and I do say what I think. And sometimes, just like a lot of people, I am as surprised by what comes out of my mouth as other people. But again, I have my own brand, I have my own voice, and it's about you owning your voice, because your voice is so important to this world. You have it for a reason, and you are going to resonate with the people that are best suited to you and what it is that you've got to share. There are sometimes Dawn is really rather fluffy and all soft, and but she doesn't come out for it to play very often. Let's get started and let's see where we go on this. Okay, so and before we get started, last week we had some beeping and some buzzing going on. So if you've got if you're here on live, I can see that we've got Sarah this week. Please make sure that if there's any noises that you're on mute, because last week was really distracting. And so step 1, we're going to be looking at language, because we're not just looking at the language that we're writing in. We're looking at our language, like how we flow through life, the energy behind language, looking at what it means to you. Because if I say, oh, they've got really great language, would that really land well with you? If I would, I'm going to use Sarah, who's joining us from the States. In the States, they tend to say good job. And that's a really very, that's used quite a lot in North America. In Britain, we don't tend to use it very much. There's also the thing where it says, I'm doing good. That's, again, another Northern American, where here in Britain, we say, I'm doing well. And one of the things that we're seeing with languages, whether it's the English speaking language, whether it is an Arabic language or a Spanish language set, they tend to have lots of different countries speaking the same root language, as I like to call it, with a flavor. So with the Arabic language, you have the Egyptian language, you have the Shami language. And so the Shami tends to come from Palestine, from Syria, Jordan, and from Lebanon. So I'm really trying hard to say them in the English version of their names. And then when you're looking at Spanish, you've got the Hispanic Spanish and you've got Latino Spanish, and different parts of the Spanish speaking world will be very different pronunciations, speeds. So again, look at your language. How are you using that and how are you framing it? Which one are you choosing? If you're going to be translating your books into, say, Spanish, are you going to be using Argentinian Spanish, or are you going to be using Spanish from, say, Barcelona? Where are you going to be using it from? And if you're going to be using American English, are you going to be using like the standard American, or are you going to be using Chicago American? Are you going to be using Oxford English? Are you going to be using more Yorkshire English? That was really bad Yorkshire accent, and I apologize to everybody there from Yorkshire, especially my friends who know I can do a really great Yorkshire accent. And so again, look at what you're communicating. And if you've got characters or you've got case studies from different parts of the world, how are you going to be distinguishing those from one another? So if you've got a British character, how are you distinguishing that from the American characters? Are you adding an S to always? Not always, anyways. A lot of people in North America say anyways. It's correct to say anyway, but a North American would tend to say anyways. So again, looking at those little subtleties of language and what they're actually meaning, and is your character or your case study or the narrative that you're using, what level of the language are we doing? Highbrow critical thinking? Are we doing relaxed? Are we doing familiar? Are we doing really formal? Again, what kind of language are you doing? And are you introducing new vocabulary to people of your own language set? For example, there are words that I like to use that people have said, oh, I haven't heard that word for ages. Or when I was traveling the world, I'd be like, oh my gosh, British people really do say proper a lot. It's a proper cup of tea. It's a proper sideboard. It's a proper this. It's a proper, and we also say whilst or indeed a lot. And it's not until you step out of your own culture or your own country that you go, oh my God, we really do that a lot. So again, maybe go traveling a bit and, or speak to people outside of your language set and find out what it is that they would say, oh, that's a really British thing, or that's a really Canadian thing to say. And there's a really lovely lady that I'm working with at the moment, Joan McMillan. She'll send me these beautiful emails and I'm like, oh my God, that's so Canadian, or that was so from Nova Scotia, or she'd say something. I'm like, oh my God, I've never heard that. Where's that one from? And again, have fun with it, use it. And it really can lift you up as you're writing. And it's a nice way of you discovering new vocabulary for yourself to use. Now, this bit is quite interesting because it's the use of good and bad language. What is that? Is that bad grammar? Is it bad words like curse words? And are these curse words, are they put in place like they've just stubbed their toe? So you're going to hear about 50,000 swear words in about 2 seconds. Are we talking about somebody who's not very well educated? So they're using bad language like curse words as, just a stream of curse words. And is that representing trauma? Is that representing a social class? Is that representing a bias within society? So again, looking at the language that you're using. Now, as always, I have a pile of books here with me today. And there is, well, as we all know, I'm a bit of a word nerd. But one of my favorite books, I'm going to take my post-it note off this one, is this Studying Literature book. And as you can see, it's got my post-it notes and everything on the front. but it actually goes through and it teaches you so many different things. And but the best part of this book, in my opinion, and that is one of 6.9 billion in the world, so stick a flower in that if you want. There's At the back of the book, it actually teaches you about all the different devices you can use when writing. When I say devices, obviously I'm not talking about your mobile phone or anything, but things like a soliloquy or a sonnet, or you're talking about, the parables or the synonyms or the metaphors, and all of those. And it actually explains what they are and how you can use it to actually improve. So that book is A Study in Literature, second edition, by Paul Goring, Jeremy Hawthorne, Dominic Mitchell, and it's by Bloomsbury Press. So again, a really great book. If you're looking at working a bit more with the art of fiction, then you need to have David Lodge's book, which is called The Art of Fiction. And that just, yes, we're dissecting lots of different parts, and we're looking at symbolism and things like that. And it's all about the S's today. So again, if you're wanting to look at language and how to really develop it, then these are a couple of really great books for you to use. And then you've got word choices. Now, those of you who know me quite well, you'll know that I worked on a book called Man Up. Now, some people have been really offended by that title. There was another book that I wrote called Alpha. So I was just trying to figure out which book I was on then. Alpha, Saving Humanity, One Vagina at a Time. Again, this is all about female genital mutilation and sex trafficking and how blood diamonds actually hid all of that. And so again, like, there's some really sensitive words in there. Why did I use them? My second book was called Wallahi, which is an Arabic word. And again, why are we using the words that we're using? Now, one of the reasons why we chose Man Up as the title, not just for the Tough to Talk book, for the series of books that I'm writing on masculinity and what it means to be a man in today's world, is because when we're looking at a phrase that's quite damaging to the human psyche, such as man up, it's been used as an insult. We needed to reframe that. We need that to be more about a celebration of men and lifting men up. Because when a man is down, that's not a good thing. No one in the military leaves a man behind, or they shout man down, they pick him up and they carry him off. So again, it's like, how do we play with these words and why are they necessary? How are people interpreting them? And are we actually using them to grab attention in the title? I mean, Saving Humanity, One Vagina at a Time. What on earth is that book about? It's about some heavy subjects, but it's all about how the alchemy and the transformation of a particular woman that I met, the work that she was doing in social justice. So again, it's an intriguing title. It makes people want to pick it up and read it. So it's not just the cover design, it's the words that you're using in your title, but also in the main body of the text. How is it going to be interpreted? Because I know that Steve, who is the curator of the Man Up book, the first Man Up book for Tough to Talk, he's had some people say, that's not a very good word title, Man Up, that's quite insulting. It's really triggered a lot of people. But the great thing is it has engaged people in conversation. So again, it's talking about men's mental health. It's a microculture. And we need to be looking at all of like when I say microcultures, I'm talking about the generational cultures, like probably music culture, and all these different subcultures within the language set or the audience that you're writing for. And then you've got the words that really hit home. So speaking of the Man Up book, one of the chapters in the book was titled Incest. Now, we use that because we're talking about various different situations that create really damaging mental health issues. Now, we could have said sexual abuse, but this was a different kind of sexual abuse. This was parental to the child. And we weren't focusing on the 99% of people that would not use that word. We wanted to grab the attention of the 1% of people who knew what that actually meant, that what that word incest actually meant for them. We needed them to know that they were seen, that they were heard, and we were talking directly to them because they are not alone. And again, it's like we could have just run away from using that word, but it was important that we said, we hear you, we see you, we've got you. So again, are the words that you're using absolutely necessary to drive a point home? And do you need to put footnotes? Now, I know I've mentioned this in quite a few of the sessions, but the footnotes can give you backing from reputable organizations, such as with Beth's book in Raising Grit about parenting. We've looked at substance abuse. So we've got links there to various different government websites, health websites, and be very careful with links, actually, while I think about it. Because sometimes if you're using just links and you're only publishing on an ebook, if that link changes, it can actually stop your book from being seen, because certain platforms will take your book off sale until that link is fixed. So it's always a good idea to either put the links on a web page on your own website so people can reference from your website, rather than actually having the links in your book. We'll go on to that a bit more at a later point on this session. Those footnotes, though, do add credibility, and there are things that you can actually use to actually help the language flow and different word choices. So, for example, you might want to have alliteration on a matopea. You might want to use the metaphors and the pacing, like I've got. Don't use too much jargon, because those of us who research or have worked in multiple different industries, there are certain acronyms and jargon that work really, really well in one industry and don't work so well in others. We've just come out of a meeting, myself and my business analyst, and I thought someone had said DNC. Those of us who are female will know that to be a certain procedure. But it also means in another industry, do not complete, which kind of works, but a DNC in the medical term is not what we were talking about in a different area. So again, make sure that if you are using acronyms, you explain those in full. Metaphors are really great. I like metaphors and analogies, so they're quite cool. Now, moving on to the grammar, I know everybody's favourite subject. I know that if Nath was watching this, he would be laughing at me, because although Nath is an absolutely stupendous storyteller, him and Full Stops always have a divorce every time, every book they have. They go on together. So again, when you're writing, are you defining with a clause? Do you even know what a clause is? If you don't, then let me know, because I will do stuff more on grammar, pull it all out from the recesses of my mind. But when we're looking at this defining and the non-defining clauses to help give some clarity, if any of you have read any of the classic novels, you will tend to find that the sentences are much longer than in a lot of modern day. And that's because they're adding extra, adding extra information to define or add context. They're going deeper without actually, and it actually makes you slow your reading so that you can actually join everything together, because a lot of the shorter sentences today are written with smaller words, less syllables, to create pace and speed. And personally, I like it when we've got a lot more defining and non-defining clauses in books and in sentences, because I mean, anybody who's read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, or anything by Tolstoy, you will know what I'm talking about. And oh, if you haven't read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, then please do yourself a favor and go and buy it. I'm not paid commission. I just love that book, and I would read it over and over again. Again, is there too much detail? Because some people go, oh, it's a huge book, it's like 1,000 pages. But the detail in that book, the things we learn, and it's the side stories and the additional characters and their little bits of backstory that really give richness. Now, whether it's fiction you're writing, whether it's a memoir, or whether it's a business case study or a textbook, are you giving too much detail, or are you not giving enough? Because we tend to find that first-time authors, they like to thank everybody in their gratitude, or most people call it acknowledgements. Here at DBI Publishing, we call it gratitude. And then you end up with all these side stories, and everyone's like, well, who is that person? What value are they adding? Like, who is that? Or they start a sentence, or they start a bit and then they go off, and it's like, what happened to that character? What happened to that person? Or you spring it on them and you're like, well, this is the person, and they've got all of this value in your life when you're writing a memoir or in a character's life, and where did that person come from? You've not given any build up to it. So again, some people like Nath, they will use an Excel spreadsheet to build out their characters. Some of us, we just know, we do mind maps. So just making sure that when you are including people, you've got all of those bits and pieces in there, such as the timeline, their importance, but making sure that the connections that you're making with your reader, like I said, it doesn't matter whether it's fiction or non-fiction, the emotions that you're invoking or the inspiration and the ideas, you've got to be relatable. You've got to be able to connect. When people read my books, they see my hands moving around. They hear my dirty giggle. They hear my rants, and the fact that they just, it's almost like I'm sat on the couch with them. They can hear me, and that's something that you need to be bringing out. So if you do speak very softly, if you do use lots of what we call flowery language. Oh, hang on, has somebody got their microphone off? Because I know that several people have joined since the beginning. I can hear some background noise. So if you're not on mute, if you can make sure that you're muted, please. And then making sure that your adjectives are accurate, because if you're talking about somebody running really fast, but everything is in slow motion, how are you going to portray that? If you're talking about a high growth startup business model, but you're not using the adjectives to talk about the dynamism, the pioneering, the fast pace of growing a business, or you are talking about trauma, or you're talking about culture, are you using the accurate words? Because I've used here accurate adjectives to give you because sometimes that alliteration helps. And one of the things that I like to do when I do a manuscript assessment or a critical review of a manuscript is go through and highlight the speech verbs. So, for example, because you have to be able to see how many of the same speech verbs you use. So he said, she said, she asked, they asked, I asked. When you see your speech verbs repeated over and over and over again, and you actually see it in a highlighted color. So if you ever come to me for a critical review or a manuscript assessment and you see lots of blue dots or lots of yellow dots, you will see how often you use a particular word. Again, making sure that you don't use the same adjective all the time, or you're not using the same phrase like really or truly. It's a really good practice to get into. So when you actually do get into the final stages of editing, making sure that one of the great things I do is, like, when you do the search, find and replace, look for the words he said, and then see how many come up in the manuscript. A little tip for you there. Or search for a particular phrase that you use a lot, or if your character uses a particular phrase, put that into your find and replace and see how often that comes up. Is there a word that is in your industry that you don't really want to be playing buzzword bingo all the time? Because there's nothing worse than sitting there in a meeting or reading a book and it is the same phrase over, like blue sky thinking. Oh my God, if I hear that, and think outside of the box, or I'm just going to circle back. I really like, we're better than that, people. We can think a bit better than that. And the thing about thinking outside the box is you need to be asking yourself who put you in the box and why did you agree to stay there? So I burn boxes. I don't like them. I put them on the bonfire. So again, just a little hint there. So step 4, we've already touched on the backstories a few moments ago. There's something that's happening in the world of literature at the moment, and this new character, right? This new category, the creative nonfiction. It allows people to be, shall we say, a little lax with the truth, or a little bit creative with the truth. And when you're writing a book of nonfiction, of fiction, or historical fiction, you know, historical fiction, if it's all fiction, but you're just using certain time zone as time points in history, that's great. If you're writing a biography of a historical figure, such as I did with Umberto Nardeliki, I know him as Al. That's why I was just struggling. I was like, what's his author name? And because we were writing about Yasutay, who was the man behind Genghis Khan or Shenghis, we were going back to the 11th century. There's not a lot written about Yasutay, so it was creative nonfiction because it was true. There was a lot of historical fact in there, but we had to get creative with a few of his backstories just to fill in the gap to make it a really interesting read. And it's a fantastic book. Eye of the Nomad, quick plug there. War of Fear. This is the first one in the trilogy, and I can't wait to receive the second half of the second manuscript because that's all underway at the moment. Woo! So again, War of Fear. This is a creative nonfiction, but there's no lies in it. Again, it's just padding out the story, giving a bit of backstory. We're looking at the pivotal points in Genghis Khan's history where Yasutay actually rescued him from a load of nomads that were actually going to have him as a slave. And probably Yasutay made a mistake there because, you know, if he hadn't have rescued Genghis Khan, what would the world look like now? When you're portraying characters such as Yasutay, he was a very modest, very humble person. He was a sage. And are you using words that actually build that in? Are you looking at how his language is very different to that of Genghis, who was very bloodthirsty? He was power hungry. Yasutay, not so much. You know, he'd rather just sit down, drink tea, and look at the flowers, a bit like me. And he loved Tata, his ass, which I'm not talking about his ass. I'm talking about his ass, his donkey style animal. And know the difference between a donkey and an ass. One's got bigger ears than the other. And again, are we looking, when we were writing this book together and we were doing the research, we had to look at a lot of the history and the geology and the geography and the weather systems for those times. So it's not just about writing a book or writing a story. You actually have to have the geography correct, because if you haven't got the weather systems right in the area where you're writing, then it's going to fall down. I've read a lot of books where I'm reading about this place. Maybe it was in Cartagena in Colombia, or whether it was in Oxfordshire, where I used to live. And I'm like, that's not right. That road does not lead to that road. That would never happen in that part of the world. And again, if you are writing about a certain area, be more Elif Shafak. Do your research. You know, or Jodie Picoult. I mean, the stuff that those two ladies learn when they write their books, you have to do your research. You've got to have the evidence, because even if it's a work of fiction, if you have got that disconnect in your location and your narrative and the settings, readers are going to be really turned off by it. I was watching, okay, a little bit of a guilty secret here for you all. I like watching Heartland. Mainly because it's got lots of horses in it, and I'm a bit I do like horses and cowboys, and there was a recent episode where a writer had written something about a style of horse and how big they were. And those people who know anything about horses will know that that's not possible. So her whole storyline fell down. So she went to Heartland, and she went to the Dude Ranch, and she learnt more about horses and what have you. So make sure your evidence is there, because when you do a book signing or you do a talk, if somebody can question you, and they will, trust me, they will question everything you've written, where you put that full stop and why you chose that word and not another word. If you've got the evidence and you can share it in your marketing, because this is another clever thing that I talk about with my clients. Lots of people are like, well, I've got all this evidence. What do I do with it? Use it as marketing. Saying, when I was researching this book, or I was writing this book, I had to learn about this, or this was a shocking piece of evidence that I found. Let me share it. Because when you're sharing that, it's actually giving you credibility, and it's actually positioning your book, and it's actually attracting in a lot of your readers. But your evidence, what you'll find is that there's wording that people are using. These people that have come up with all of this expert knowledge, they will be using terminology, they will be using phrases. And so this actually really helps you to learn how to frame something. So if you are looking at something along the lines of, eco issues, environmental issues, or child abuse, they are going to be using certain phrases and looking at the psychotherapy or the psychology of something, and they'll have paid a lot of money, or that they're in an industry where these phrases have been tried and tested. So it saves you a lot of the hard work and a lot of the problems. So if you're using a phrase, like I said, with the Man Up book, we use the words incest. We needed to use that, but it was how we framed that word and how it was presented. And when you're using your evidence, you can say, it was really difficult writing about this, but when I've done my research, this is what I found, this is how they presented it, it helped me. And it also, what that does is it can be used as further reading, the bibliography, as I put at the bottom of here, and you can actually send people to those books or to those websites. So it actually gives them more information. So it adds that credibility and that trust factor that you're actually looking for. And it also means you don't have to rely on memory. Now, we've already talked about metaphors and synonyms a few moments ago. One of the things that I also do highly recommend is, I've got another book here, I should have got this one out, but this is a dictionary of homonyms. And I do think that this is a really interesting book. This again is by David Rothwell, because a lot of people, they get them mixed up. Is it there, or there? Is it two, or two? And is it past or past? So many manuscripts that I receive, these are some of the very basic errors that I see in a lot of manuscripts. And sometimes I wonder how the people that are writing these manuscripts, how they write an email in their professional career, because it really is quite shocking sometimes. And then you've got words like he knows, and is it whose or whose? Is it with a WHOSE, or is it WHO''S? And the one that trips most of us up is it's or its. That's one that makes a lot of us go, is it that one, or is it that one? So again, make sure that you're getting the right homonym there. When you're writing about and now I'm going to go into the realm of fiction at the moment, or if you're writing an anthology and you're bringing different experts together, are you looking at really showcasing their personality? Because if you've got, so I'm reading a manuscript at the moment by Amanda Denham. It's her new book, Seven Feathers. And you can really, Amanda is so brilliant at the way in which she describes her characters and the vocabulary she uses, because you can really feel the anxiety coming through in some of her characters, and the overconfidence, almost arrogance of other ones, and the fear that comes up, because she just captures it so beautifully. She's really great at writing speech as well. You won't see many highlights in Amanda's manuscripts of the she said, he said, they said, and because she's really understood that when there's only two people chatting with one another, you don't need to use the speech verbs and the explanation of who's talking, because there is only two people talking. And again, it's about making sure that when you're writing, just observe people around you. If you're in a cafe, for example, and you want, and the cafes are some of the best places to go and study, you know, how to describe your characters and the words to use in your writing, because you might see somebody who is just talking 10 to the dozen, and they're really loud, and they're doing it in a really energetic, really endearing way. And then you've got that really brash, loud, arrogant, you can hear them 10 miles away, and they just want everyone to know their business, and they're the people on the train that is having a very important high-powered business meeting, don't you know, and they're so very important, as opposed to the person who's just there whispering and doesn't want anybody to even know they exist in the world. Go and listen to that, go and observe that energy, go and listen to some of the words that they're using, not listen to their conversation, obviously, that would just be rude, but listen to some of the words that they're using. We have those friends in our life, we have those colleagues, we even probably have those family members. Just go and listen. So also, a little bit of a trick here, some of you might already know this one. If you're going to pick the name of a character that you do not like, whether it's a character in fiction or a character in, i.e., a subject, are you going to be using the name or a play on somebody's name? Of someone. So if there's somebody that you really don't like, are you going to pick the name of the person you really didn't like at school, or the name of a boss that you really didn't like, and actually give that horrible character in your piece of fiction that name? Are you going to be doing a case study? So for example, there might have been something, you might be writing, I don't know, about divorce, and you are talking about Ruth's story. You might choose Ruth's story because this person may have hit the roof. You know, again, it's how are you playing on the words? Now, Ruth, again, you're not hitting the roof, ROOF, but the female name, RUTH. So look at how you can look at what happened in the story or what's happening, or the people in your life. Like, for example, there is one character in the book, Faith. I had to pick a name of a really strong, powerful woman who was very articulate, who knew what she wanted. And I chose the name Shaista of a friend of mine, because the character really embodied Shaista's energy. And I was like, oh, that's just Shaista all over. So I chose my friend's name. And again, it's a way of you acknowledging your friends or the people that have inspired you. So make sure that, you know, you're looking at the energy and the naming there, and who is embodying what, because we're not just talking about the pace of the storyline or the pace of events that are happening. We're talking about the pace of the person. How quickly are they alchemizing the pain or the situation? How quickly are you sharing your research? How quickly is the court case that you're writing about, or the environmental impact? How quickly is all of this unfolding? And it all comes back to, again, the words that you're using. You know, are you looking at babbling brook, you know, or are the courts taking so long to deal with something that, you know, the slug has beaten them on the way? You know, again, we don't want to use the hare and the tortoise all the time. Think of something else that, you know, represents those. and make sure that your timelines are accurate. Because if there's one thing that I've noticed in a lot of manuscripts that get sent my way, and I made a mistake at the very beginning of my career, there were just some timelines that were just a bit off because of memory. Make sure you're writing everything down and getting that timeline accurate before you start. It will save you a lot of embarrassment or a lot of editing fees somewhere down the line. And it could mean the difference between $10,000 of editing and maybe $2,000 of editing. So make sure you get your timeline right. This one I think is really important because, well, they're all important. That's why I'm covering them. But knowing that when you read a book, there's got to be that transformation. All great literature includes transformation. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about business transformation, legal transformation, or character or self-transformation. It doesn't matter. There has to be that alchemy in there. Now, you'll notice I used transformation 3 times, and I did that as a point because if you're using that same word over and over and over and over and over again, it becomes really tedious. What are some of the synonyms that you can use instead of transformation? Alchemy, metamorphosis. You know, look at some of the different words that you can use. And if there's a, you know, when you're confused, are you going to just use discombobulated, which is one of my favorite words. But again, make sure that when you're writing, you're owning your voice. It doesn't matter whether you're writing a character's voice. You know that there are moments of your life when you are a really quiet person, when you just need that reflection time. Go and tap into that. What does your voice sound like then? When you are on fire and you're thriving and you're really powering and you're really in that summer season of your life or the month or the week, what energy and what voice are you using? So those of us who are talking really softly to our children or really daft to our dogs, or we're talking really powerful in a court of law, or we're delivering a business speech, or we're addressing the classroom, or we're defending ourselves because we've been speeding. Not that I have a car, but if we've been speeding, we might be 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. Sorry, officer. You know, you're very apologetic, or it might be a bit cheeky. You might be a bit flirty. Depends on who you are and what it is. And if any of you have seen Paris Hilton in action, whenever she's delivering something, you will see this very bubbly, very, you know, congenial, very flirty woman who is like getting the attention and really reeling people in. And then when she delivers her hard points, when she delivers the information, you see that switch. And those women amongst us that know about that switch, I can identify the moment it happens. It's just that shift. So making sure that you embody that and own your voice, because remember, there will be people that will hear you on podcasts, or there will be people that know of you from speaking engagements or training engagements that you've been delivering some training, and they want to buy your book. And if your book is not written in your voice and you're not including your accent or like different phrasal verbs that you're using, or like British or American idioms, if you do not own your voice when you're writing and someone buys your book, imagine the disappointment. If it's all bland and there's none of you in it, it's just been watered down. And that's why AI is not a really great tool for writing with, because you're not in it. They might use the odd word here and there, but the energy signature's not there. There was a lady I met yesterday, Anita. She described it perfectly. She said, when you read something written by AI, it's like you've met a psychopath. They know the words, they get they get what the reality, but there's no emotion there. They're completely devoid of that. They're completely disconnected. I thought that was a brilliant analogy. I don't know whether you'll agree, let me know. But again, when you're writing and you're choosing these words, make sure that it reflects who you are. Because if you've got to start thinking of how many people you're being, that's going to get really, really confusing. You've got to be real at any time, because you could meet one of your readers at any time. You could meet an opportunity at any time. I remember being in Port Douglas. I'd been at sea for 4 weeks. I arrive in Port Douglas. I hadn't been there for more than 24 hours, and someone recognized me, came up to me and said, "Are you Dawn?" And I'm thinking, I don't know anybody here, just ignore them. And then the person comes right up to me, "Are you Dawn?" And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I am. That is me. And if I'm pretending to be the author, and I'm pretending to be the marketing person, and I'm pretending to be, can you imagine the psychotic breaks that I would be having? Make sure you own who you are. It's absolutely essential for your own sanity. And it's also good for damage limitations, as I've put here, because being true to who you are, making no apologies for who you are or for your characters. When you have confidence in yourself and you have confidence in your characters and what you have written, you don't need to pretend. You don't need to put on this brave face, and you don't have to worry about being likable, because the people that will really, really be attracted to what you've written and will be attracted to your messaging and want to learn more from you, they're going to appreciate your, to use a buzzword, authenticity. They're going to like the fact that they can hear you. They can see your hands waving. Some of my readers have asked me, I'm just wondering, can you talk without moving your hands? And I think, no, I've lived in the Arab world for far too long. If I didn't talk with my hands, I don't think I'd be able to talk at all. But people can hear that in my writing. Again, the quotes that you might be using, make sure that they are on point for yourself. They're with people that, if you're challenging the quote, if you are celebrating that quote, is it in line with your own voice, or is it going to be that complete disconnect? And that, like I call it whiplash. Sometimes when you're reading, you get whiplash from what the writer has done, because it's like, what? Where did that come from? And this is why it's so important that we write our own material rather than have someone, because the alchemy that goes on within us when we're learning all this new information and these new words, and we're learning all of the this vast knowledge bank, we're building this vast knowledge bank of information. We change. If your book is not changing you, and you are still the same person at the end of the book as you were at the beginning of the book, you need to go back to the beginning and you need to start writing that book again, because there is something very, very magical that happens to us when we write our own book. You can't be the same person at the end as you were at the beginning. There's just too much to learn. And like that, if you are the same person you were at the end as you were at the beginning, you need to start again. You absolutely have to, or you need to hire me and I'll sort you out. Because just no. Again, you've got to, I say got to because you've got to go deep. This is worthy of your life. You're putting your name to something. That's why owning your voice and knowing who you are and knowing your characters and your case studies and your evidence and your research, knowing that and owning all of that is a beautiful gift to yourself. And those people who read your material, they're going to trust you. They're going to want your next book. They want to go to see you talk. They're going to want to attend your workshops. They're going to want to be your client. They're going to want to do business with your business because you stood for something. You spoke to them. And if your own voice is different to the one that's in the book, that's going to make them distrust you. So you've got to trust yourself to trust yourself, so that other people trust you. There you go. Right, finally, on to step 7. Universal truths. What is truth? What is universal truth? I was discussing this with somebody. The sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. But what if you're on the other side of the world? Does it still rise in the east and set in the west? I've sailed around the world. I get lost very often, not because I don't know how to read a compass, but again, time zones. That, like, sometimes you're pointing in a different direction. You might be thinking that you're heading south, but if you've had to change tack during the night while you've been asleep and the crew have changed, and you still think you're going south, but your internal compass is going, no, we're going north. You need to recalibrate. Again, look at the universal truths that you think you know about, because there are lots of truths about this world that are not truth. We're all in, for want of a better phrase, we're all in the matrix. Whether we think that we're free and we're outside of the matrix, or we're living off grid. Some people really are living off grid, but lots of people who say that they're living off grid, are they really? Because if they're saying they're living off grid and they're actually on a Zoom call with us, well, they're actually on the grid. So again, let's look at what we're saying, look at what these different things mean, because living off grid might mean that, you know, you're not plugged into the electricity supply like the major utility companies. It might mean that you don't go shopping in the supermarket. You might be growing your own veggies. You might have wind power. You might have water power. Again, look at the things and the phrases that you're using and go, well, actually, is this true for this particular culture? Is this true for this micro or subculture? Again, it all comes down to your languaging. It all comes down to what you believe. And when you test the words that you're using, when you write down a piece of logic, or you write down a certain set of facts, when you look at it and go, I believe in freedom, do you? Do you really truly believe in freedom? Do you believe that everybody has a right to freedom of speech? Do you, when we say we believe in freedom for everybody, so does this mean that we believe that certain individuals should be sleeping with or having sex with minors? They're free to choose. Again, how is your universal truth, or this statement you're making, how does that impact in lots of other areas of life? If you say that you believe in freedom for everybody and everybody is free to move around, does that mean we should unlock all the prisons and allow everybody to move around freely and give everybody their freedom? Again, we have to look at what we're saying and how that impacts, because there are going to be people that take something that we say quite literary. Now, in my first book, Friday Bridge, I made an in-joke about my mum's cooking. And I made a reference about her age, because I said, oh, my mum's getting on a bit. My mum was the youngest mum in school. Like, she had me when she was 22. She always used to win mother's race. All of my friends, their mums were 45, roughly about that. I made an in-joke about my mum being an old mum. We knew that she was quite a relatively new mum, but there was a woman from New Zealand who took huge offence. So again, are the jokes that we're using, or the banter that we're using in our books, are they going to translate well? And what's the terminology? So for example, with the word wicked, I was born in the end of the 70s, raised in the 80s, and raved in the 90s. So when I talk about someone being wicked, I'm talking about them being an excellent person, a really great person. But if I'd have said that to my grandma, oh my goodness, she'd have thought they needed exercising, they'd need to go to church. Again, who are you writing for, and what language? Those of you who are roughly my generation, you'll know that our children will be talking about something being fat. They don't mean FAT, they mean PHAT. And when something is sick, they don't mean that they need to go to the doctor or that they're vomiting. Apparently being sick is a really cool thing to be, because it means you're sick. I'm like, why? Get them some medicine. I have no idea. And when we're using these abbreviations in text messages, I'm regularly texting my children, what does that mean? I'm guessing. And I'm sure they make up half of them as they're going along. Again, when you're using text messages in maybe your writing, like conversations, are you changing the font and getting the typesetter to show that it's a text message, like we did with Amanda's book? And again, looking at the terminology of your industry, look at the terminology or the phrasing of scenarios that are going on about the things you're writing about. If it's human trafficking, are you looking at the terminology of your country as opposed to the human trafficking terminology in a country where the people are being shipped to or flown to? Are you looking at how you're expanding your brand? So it might be that you have worked in, for example, and I use myself, I'm going to give an explanation here. I use myself quite a bit, I know, because I know my truth. I don't like to use other people in examples unless I've worked with them or I know their story, because I have context, I have backstory. Again, it comes back to, what are you writing about? What do you know? Because if I was to use somebody from, say, the media, or somebody that I didn't know very well and I'd never worked with them, and I'm using their story, I might get something wrong. And then where does that lend me? Where does that put me? It's just gossip. It's just projection. Whereas when I use myself in these situations, it's because I know where I'm coming from. So the brand expansion, when we talk about our hobbies as an author or as a writer, we might be known, so most people know me as a bit of a word nerd, bookworm, but people also know me as a sailor. They also know I am a dog lover. So again, how are you building those things into, are you going to have a story or a main character or an element of your book where you're always referring to your dog, or that character has your dog? We all know that Yoga with Adrienne, anyone who does yoga online with Adrienne, you will know that she has her dog with her. And he's always joining her and getting in the way as she's trying to do her yoga poses. Those of us who have dogs and do yoga, we will know that we'll be in downward dog and our dog will decide to come and lie right in the middle or try and kiss us on the face or do something else. Again, are we bringing that into our marketing? Are we bringing that into our manuscripts? Because when we do that, if we've got a particular character who has a dog with them all the time, then it becomes that thread throughout all the books in that series. It becomes that thread. It might be that you go on stage and you take your own dog with you. How are you going to be expanding your brand and actually making that hook in your marketing? What elements of your book are you using for your marketing, or what elements of your life are you using? Most people, I have been called a mermaid since I was a very little girl, because I was always swimming, always in the water. Even when I was in the bath, I was pretending I was swimming. So I got called a mermaid. I'm more of a Banksy mermaid than a Disney mermaid. There's nothing Disney about me. Banksy, however, those of you who know Banksy is, well, those of you who don't know Banksy, where have you been? But again, I'm a Banksy mermaid rather than a Disney mermaid. And how can you bring in the elements of your personality to connect and map out all of those things that make you instantly recognizable? And again, how are you building that into the design of the pages in your book? I said text messages. Are you putting those in there? Is there a certain phrase that one of your character always uses? For example, in my post, I would say, and the thing is, can you use that in one of your, maybe if you're writing a textbook, you can have like maybe a paragraph as part of one of your teachers. The thing is, can you have something that, there's always a character that's got a cup of tea? How are you projecting that? Have you then teamed up with a tea manufacturer? Have you teamed up with somebody that adds value, that you can collaborate with? They can have your books in their tea shop and then you can sell their tea on your website. How are you expanding your brand with the words that you say, some of the storylines of your life, and how you're actually designing your life? And again, when I say designing your life, this is why I talk about being an author coach rather than just a writing coach, because when we design our life on purpose and in purpose, then we actually begin to make our life a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. So that's all 7 steps today. I hope you found those very useful. Those of you who are on would like to come off video and ask some questions about, I know it's a lot to take in. If you'd like to come out, take yourselves off mute and bring yourself back on camera, please do so. I'm going to stop the recording now. So those of you who are watching on catch up, I'm not actually going to stop the recording because I realize I have not done something. I know that my VA Tyee will tell me off for that. Let me do a stop share there, because I haven't told you. Oh my God, what am I doing here? I need to share with you about my 45-minute free author session. It's not a sales pitch, by the way. Those of you who think that it will be a sales pitch, it isn't. It's just me gifting you time so that we can talk books and I can help you. So if you want to spend 45 minutes with me talking about your book, getting ideas, and me directing you in the right way for you and your book, whether that's introducing you to another publisher, whether it's me introducing you to an agent, or whether you want to consider working with me, that's up to you. This session is about you and your book and where you're going and what you need to do. Head on over to authors.youcanbook.me and book yourself a spot in my calendar. There's 3 days a week next month. We've got 4 days a week there. And if you already know that you do want to learn from me, you have got the 7-week author course, which is 7 weeks. It's designed for 7 weeks because we know that you can perform you can break habits in 7 days, implement another, build those practices, and then follow through. 7 is a magic number, and this is a self-study course. You will be sent each module at the beginning of each week. There are very short activities within it. There are about 30 pages to go through in each module. There are journaling, there are activities, there's tracking, there's exercises for you to be doing. I'm not giving you burpees to do though, don't worry, because if you're anything like me, you can't stand up burpees. So there are lots of information. Jake says it's like an MBA. That might sound a bit scary, but it's not. It's very comprehensive, and we look at the whole author life, everything from your accolades, the people that you're surrounding yourself with, how you're going to publish, how you're going to distribute, where you're going to get your money from, breaking down your money stories and your limiting beliefs. It's a very holistic course, and you can make payment either in 1, over 3 months, or 6 months. So there we go. That's done that. That's dawnbates.com 7-week author course. And if you want a session with me, it's the authors.youcanbook.me. So that's the housekeeping bit at the end. I'm now ready to take questions from those of you who are live. Those of you who've been watching on the replay, thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you've got any questions, do send them through to me. Tyee will put all the notes for you in the videos. But thank you so very much, and I'll see you again next week. Ciao for now.